Welcome to the For Peyton Podcast. I'm Tammy Valentine, and this podcast is about mental health, real life, and the experiences that shape us. I created this podcast in memory of my son, Peyton, known to many as Pete, who passed away in December of 2024. Whether you're here for insight, connection, or simply a deeper conversation, I'm just glad you're here. This is For Peyton. Welcome back to the For Peyton Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Today, my guest is Nich Hazelett. He is a sergeant with the Colorado State Patrol, and he's been with the State Patrol for 18 and a half years. He's also a 12-year Air Force veteran, and he grew up in a military family. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Nich and let him give us a little bit more of his background and what life looks like for him and growing up, what life was like.
Yeah, thanks, Tammy. And it's a joy to be here with you today. And hello, everybody. My name is Nich Hazelett. That's my job. Tammy's kind of explained my careers and a little bit of my background, but I think it's important to know who someone is not by what they do, but who they are. So before I ever put on a uniform or a suit of any kind, I'm a husband of 23 years, my bride, Amy, and we have two teenage daughters, both in high school. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a friend, and then I do the work in policing and in law enforcement. So I do the work because of all the other things. So that's who I am. And Tammy, you're right, I grew up in a military family, and that kind of really broadened my experience in seeing the world. I was born overseas in Germany, but on a U.S. Air Force base. And even as a kid, when we were in Texas, I remember that song "Born in the USA" came on, and I knew every word to it. But my brother would say, "You can't sing that song. You were born in Germany." It was kind of funny.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad that you shared who you are and the different roles that you have. And sometimes when we ask somebody, tell us a little bit about yourself, we get the professional version of them. So
Sure.
I'm glad that you shared being a husband and a father and a brother and a son. That's so much more. It expands the vision of who you are. So thanks for sharing all of that.
Yeah, I saw that in the military too, and being raised in the military culture. Some of these jobs they're impressive. Like my dad was a fighter pilot, but
Okay.
he doesn't share that with folks. He shares who he is as a father and as a husband.
Yeah.
So I had that example very early on. And then when I went in the military, I looked around at some of my peers, and outside of that uniform, they didn't have an identity, and that scared me. I didn't want to be just what I do. And I realized that early on in life. But in the same thing in my current job, as a state trooper, as a corporal, as a sergeant, we can get wrapped up in what our hands do, what we've sworn an oath to do, and that can become who you are. But
Yeah.
I think that there's so much more to each and every one of us. Directors of this, or I'm a manager at this, or I'm a CEO of this. Yeah, but who are you?
Right.
Is the most important question. And in the face with law enforcement, we wear a uniform, and we're associated with that, whether that's a good association or a negative association. Very quickly, I can walk into one room with a uniform on, and all the eyes turn. I can walk in that same room dressed just like this, and no one even turns their head at all.
Right.
It's an interesting feeling. It really is.
And the work that we do can really influence our identity, but when it becomes our identity, that's when it becomes confusing and stressful, and sometimes our anxiety gets higher because we're trying to maintain that. But it's always nice to get grounded back to the core of who we are and keep that balance. So
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just what a day in your life looks like, because this podcast is all about mental health conversations across different walks of life. And so just tell me what a day in your life looks like, from personal to professional, across the board.
Sure. Today's a day off. Tomorrow morning, I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm heading over to Pueblo to go support the fires for through the weekend and into next
Wow.
week. So today, like on a day off, is waking up. This is my afternoon coffee, but I like to wake up in the morning, with my family and have breakfast. And so we saw the girls out the door this morning heading. They're leading at VBS this week, and today's the last day. But in the career that I've chosen, my days off don't follow a normal Monday through Friday 9 to 5 kind of job.
Right.
As far as what a day looks like on a regular duty day in the policing profession, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
You can make the grandest of plans. Like on the 4th of July, one of my teammates and I were going to go support Alamosa with the parade. And 2 minutes into it, we were lights and sirens leaving our posts, our road shutdowns for an emergent situation. We had these great plans to help out, but someone gets shot, you got to go.
Yeah.
So every day is kind of a blank slate. If you make this decision, well, now turn to page 96, and you're off into this spider web
Yes.
of a life. And that's kind of what law enforcement's like.
Yeah.
No 2 days are alike. No two contacts with people are alike. But I do get that unique opportunity to meet a lot of people. Unfortunately, it's because of a negative choice or something that they did wrong.
Right. And I kind of get on the other side of that. When I meet people, it's usually when they're starting to figure out, how do I not make that choice again? How do I make the changes?
Right.
So there's this like beautiful handoff between the world of law enforcement over to like mental health and professionals in that area, because when the consequences hit hard enough, that's when they want to come and see me and say, I can't do this again, and
Right.
I want to make a change. And so it's just interesting to watch people across that continuum as they go through life. My day's a lot more predictable than yours, and I'm not a morning person. I could not do the 3 o'clock in the morning thing. I could stay up till 3 and be fine, but I can't.
Right.
I can't get up at 3.
Yeah, that's not a usual go hour. That's kind of unique. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had to do a lot, like in terms of helping with fires where we've had so many in the state, or is this a different kind of outside of your like normal expectations for work, or do you do this quite a bit?
I don't do this quite a bit. I do have some experience with it. In my second duty station, when I got to Colorado Springs, I started off on the Western Slope, started off in Glenwood Springs, but as soon as I got to Colorado Springs in 2012, we had the Waldo Canyon fire. It's a different kind of work. So like there's some folks are assigned to do the traffic control points. Some folks are to do damage assessments. It depends on what stage we're in on these fires. And it's interesting to tell people that you're in a mandatory evacuation area. You have to go. The fire's coming this way, and they say no.
Yeah,
that's hard.
Yeah.
And then we find ourselves shifting, our resources, whether we're on days off or days on, to go support this, because there is nothing more important, and I believe this thoroughly. There's nothing more important than protecting people's lives. Right.
Yeah.
Second to that is their property. But it's definitely second. I could care less about your car or your house if it comes down to you. Starting off in my career, I made 2 promises when I went into law enforcement. The first promise broke very, very quickly. And I promised my friends, I promised my family, I said, I won't let this job change me. That one broke very quick. You don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what you're going to get exposed to. You don't know how hard some of these things are going to hit you. I made that promise out of ignorance. But Tammy, the second promise that I made to my family was that if my love for people changes, I will quit that day. If I come to work tomorrow because I don't like people or I'm against them, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
That promise I've been able to keep for the last 18 and a half years. And on the opposite side of it, it's only grown because we see the hard things, because we see the things that most people aren't supposed to see. My love for people has only grown. And I'm more convinced of that today than I ever have been. Yeah. The average person and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this number. I've heard the statistic recently. The average person is exposed to between 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 traumas in their life. And in law enforcement, on average, we're exposed to between 400 and 600 traumas in a career.
Gosh, my goodness.
And that's not just our life, but that's in our career. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Tell me more about how you're seeing that affect professionals in law enforcement.
Sure. No, I think it's a really good question to ask, and it should have been asked way sooner than it recently has. When I first started and when I was in the military, we did not have the resources that we have today in mental health. Wellness became a topic probably around 10 years ago. But wellness and mental health is a huge focus in our profession now. My history with the post-traumatic stress involved with the exposure to these things, really it started for me in 2015. I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2015.
Okay.
The traumas and the exposure were in the years before that. And it's an interesting thing to look back on, because it could have been prevented. And let me put some context around this. In 2015, I had a call at work where I went to go make a traffic stop, and the guy ended up making choices and crashed and died in my hands. I did CPR on this guy for over 4 minutes, and I brought him back, and then he died. That hit me harder than anything that I'd been hit with yet, as far as exposure, or so I thought. In the next 2 weeks, I made a phone call the very next day, and I scheduled, outside of my resources with the patrol and outside of my resources in the military. And I was in the military again at the time in the reserves. Okay. But we were at the very inception of this whole conversation about mental health and wellness. When I first started in law enforcement, and definitely when I was in the military, if you went and saw a clinician or a counselor for stuff like this, you were seen as weak.
Right.
You're broken.
Right.
So we were just starting to open that envelope to this topic at that time frame in 2015. And I knew that I would probably be supported if I went through the department for it, but I was still cautious. Right. So I sought it out on my own, and I'm so thankful that I did. We weren't able to meet for the first time until 2 weeks after the event, but during that 2 weeks, I could not sleep. I couldn't eat. My adrenaline wouldn't shut off, and I lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. So in that very first meeting, which I look back with so much gratitude now, we walked through not just that event, but we laid everything out on all the exposures over the years. It was the one event that was the bottle cap for everything that was inside. That in our profession and in the military alike, you have to present yourself with a strength. You know, you've got this badge. It's a symbol. It's a shield. You're wearing a vest to protect what's on the inside. But proverbially, we do the same thing to ourselves. We shield ourselves. We put a vest on, and we're like, these things can't hurt me. Oh, that was hard. That was gross. This was tragic. That was heartbreaking. But I'm not going to let it behind the vest. And you can only do that for so long.
Right.
You can only do that for so long. I'm thankful that in today's policing generation, they're getting those resources from the very first day they enter the academies.
Yeah.
The resources that I did not have. We have stood up. We've had peer support for a long time, and I was a member of the peer support team for many years. And this was all after that event in 2015. But there was something very profound that happened also on that next day after I made that phone call. I called my supervisor. I called my sergeant, who is a dear friend, dear mentor, still to this day. And I called him and I said, hey, can we go for a walk? I need to talk. And he was a combat vet in the Army. He'd been on the patrol several years longer than me. And he was like, sure, come on over. So we went for a walk, took his dogs out, and I just poured my heart out to him. And at the end of the conversation, he looked at me, he said, after you get through this, I have something that I want to share with you. And I'm like,
You're gonna make me wait.
how about just tell me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can take it. Like, just shoot me straight. Just tell me.
Yeah.
He said, okay. And he knows my background very well. He knew me very well, still does. He looked at me and he goes, you know what? I'm actually glad you're going through this. And I wanted to just haul back and hit him. And I'm like, why would you say that? You're glad that I went through this? He said, Nich, I'm glad that you've gone through this, because one day you're going to be able to recognize what one of your guys is going through. And that's a strength that not a lot of people have.
Right. Right.
Unfortunately, Tammy, that has come true more times than I can count.
Yeah.
I can see it in someone because I've lived it. And I am thankful that I've gone through it. I got some tools. I got some resources and abilities to tackle the hard stuff of what things to let in, how to process these things, and recognizing that's not normal.
Right.
That's not good.
Right. Yeah.
And what we choose to focus on it. I'm a Star Wars fan. Our whole family is. We're a little bit of nerds. Now, you're not going to see Star Wars posters up on the walls in here, but in episode 1, which came out in 99, Darth Vader is a kid, right? And Qui-Gon Jinn is the senior Jedi over Anakin, who we know turns to the dark side, becomes Darth Vader. But at 10 years old, Anakin's starting to like wrestle with these new emotions, the anger, the fear. And Qui-Gon Jinn takes a knee and looks at him and says, Anakin, what you focus on determines your reality.
Right.
And that's really, really powerful.
It is.
If we focus on all the hard stuff, if we focus on the negative aspects in our jobs, or if we only look at problem, everything is negative. Everything's a problem.
Right.
And in my line of work, we get paid to go find people breaking the law. We can't pull somebody over for doing the right thing. That's illegal. I can't do that. Like, I have no just cause to stop somebody because they did the right thing, even though I want to say, and I have rolled my window down in traffic many times saying, hey, you had the opportunity to run that red light, but you made the right choice. Thanks.
Good job. Yeah.
The look on people's faces is like,
what?
Interesting, right?
What just happened? Yeah. Yeah.
But what naturally happens is unnatural in our line of work is that we get really good at finding the negative.
Right. Right.
So then we bring it back to our office, our place of work with our teams, and we do it to each other.
Yeah.
And then the even more unfortunate thing happens, and we bring it home.
Yeah.
And we become police in our own home. We police our spouse, our children, and we only focus on the negative. So
I would imagine that that's got to carry into like how you're managing your own perception of self. It's always being hard on yourself and negative, and not ever being able to see anything that you're doing right because you're so used to looking for what's wrong.
So very true. So very true. I have this conversation about this focus determines your reality with my teammates, with my peers, with my whole department. I've traveled around the country teaching law enforcement officers how to communicate. And a lot of it is sharing this conversation. And the choice then becomes to each person that has heard this of, okay, well, I recognize that we get paid to go find the negative. Okay, we're really good at doing that. Now I'm aware that that's why we do this back in our office. This is why I do it on the team. Oh my gosh, I've done this at home. Now the choice becomes theirs. Do you choose to keep that focus? Or do you intentionally seek out the good? Do you intentionally seek out the positives in your office, with your teammates? And this doesn't just apply to policing.
Right.
It doesn't.
It's
this is not siloed to law enforcement.
Yes.
Do you choose to come into your home with your occupation that goes after and puts fires out all over the place, finding these negatives? Or do you make a conscious choice to look for the good in the moment, the good in the people around you, the good in
Mm-hmm.
public, and make the best out of it? Because
Yeah.
that determines our reality too.
Right. Right. And it seems like people want to like swing the pendulum too far one way or the other, to where it's like, I'm okay. This is kind of what you were saying. This isn't affecting me. It's all's good. I'm all right. Or everything is awful and horrible. And, and I'm learning as I work with clients, as I work with people on my own work that I do on myself. It's a lot of integrating. How do I live with both of them? And this kind of goes back to the Star Wars theme. How do you have both light and dark and integrate it into your
Right.
world in a way that's healthy, to where you find that you can tap into some of those harder things that you've been through to have empathy and understanding of other people, but also not let it become your identity that determines the path you set your life on. But that can be challenging.
It can.
Yeah.
As you're explaining that, in my mind, I can see this meme that I saw years ago of these little Lego figures, and anybody can Google this. It's a how do I explain this? It's like 3 or 4 different grids of police officers in different stages of their career. When you have the cop in year 1 to 5 who's like ready to go, and you have the 5 to 10 guy who's like, and then you got the year 10 to 20 who's just this angry, like, like he's seen everything in the world. He's just salty.
Yeah.
And we see these stages, if you will, these seasons of everything's new and exciting. And then you're like, okay, I've got the job. I understand the job.
Right.
And then you get that last part of it. I'm a few years away from retirement.
Mhm.
I've seen it in the military. I see it in law enforcement. I see a lot of people leave the profession just angry because they've gotten so good at finding the negative.
Right.
And it's so unnatural, but it naturally happens.
Yeah.
I want to leave this profession thankful for the work that I've done. I want to leave this job loving people still, and thankful that I've served them with giving them my best. I don't want to leave bitter and angry. And I think a lot of people do that in their professions.
Yeah. So what do you see that's working well in supporting people with that shift of like ending their career where there's a sense of fulfillment and gratitude versus bitterness and resentment? What is working well? And what do you think needs to shift? Whether it's just in law enforcement, but just maybe in society as a whole, where are we getting it right and where are we getting it wrong?
Where are we getting it right and where are we getting it wrong? One of the areas we're getting it right now is in the training and in the conversation of wellness and mental health in our profession. I can speak for my agency. I know that a lot of the larger agencies around the state and around the nation are very focused on wellness. And if we're talking about that, we're not the only ones talking about it.
Right.
In the area that it's not going well is that there's still some leaders out there, and I'll speak for the sergeants. Not all of the frontline leaders, because we came up in a different generation, have accepted that or are willing to spend the time in that conversation with people, because as men, from guy to guy, that's hard. Like, you don't want to do that.
Right.
But we also have, I don't know, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we carry that into our jobs. We carry those into our families.
Right.
But I also, thinking about the work that's gone on for about that 10 years, and man, we should have done this sooner. We should have done this sooner. Why shouldn't we be encouraging each other to go seek counseling when we're well?
Right.
We go to the doctor on an annual basis to get a checkup. Why aren't we doing the same thing for our brain or our heart?
Right.
And I'm also thankful that, we're in that wellness conversation. They're approaching this from a holistic standpoint, that it's not just physical, it's not just mental. It's not just emotional, but it's also spiritual too.
Yes.
And they're encouraging us to spend time in that domain as well.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that is actually the thing that has kept me grounded throughout my whole career is my faith.
Right.
I don't know how I could have gotten through any of the loss that I've experienced, the tragedy that I've seen without my faith. I don't know.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
That's for me personally and professionally.
Yep.
It's the only thing that's carried me through a lot of what I've been through, and a lot of like the transformation that comes
Yeah.
in the aftermath of trials and adversity. It really can strengthen our resilience, strengthen how we respond to others. Sometimes I think it is the thing that keeps us from becoming jaded and
Mm-hmm.
bitter and resentful is faith, because it carves out room for compassion and forgiveness and grace with ourselves when we're still struggling with something, when we feel like we should be over it. But yeah, it's so crucial in all of
It
that.
is.
So I'm glad you brought that to the table. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I found that in the last couple of years, the conversations of our faith have been happening more frequently at work with my teammates. There is this misnomer, I think, in just in life in general. It's not specific to policing, of this work-life balance. Like we've heard this term so many times.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a switch that we can just flip off. And work is also an important, but it's an important component of our life.
It is.
Because we've
it's
chosen
so many
to
hours
do
of our life and so much energy
Yes.
of our life. Yeah.
So it's not split. It's part of our life. We get to see the good and the bad of it. But it's not only just one of these things during that time block.
I feel like you're bringing up so many good points. I don't want to skip past any of them. I look back, it's about 10 years ago, I was starting a private practice, seeing clients a little bit on the side. And then over the years, I've worked in clinics and medical clinics, but have had the behavioral health component. I've definitely seen, especially years ago, where if I worked with somebody that was in the military or in law enforcement, they were really careful to open up to me. They were worried, like, what are you going to diagnose me? What's that going to look like on paper? What's going to go in my chart? What's going to be in my notes? How is this going to affect my ability? Am I still going to be allowed to do my job? Am I still going to be allowed to have my firearms? There was so much guardedness.
Yeah.
And I will say 10 years ago to where it is now, I can definitely see that there's more openness around it. I find that officers are more comfortable. And so the culture has shifted, thank goodness. And thank goodness there are people advocating for the wellness that you're talking about, because that's hard. I will say, though, and I said this in one of my other interview episodes, is I believe in the work that I do because I see it work. There actually is hope. There is hope for people that feel like, oh, I'm never going to get over that. I'm never going to stop having these nightmares. I'm never going to stop having these panic attacks. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right therapist, the right psychiatrist, the right psychologist, the right medical doctor, the right spiritual advisor. But when you find them and it works, you actually can feel better. That's the one thing I would say, is there is hope for anybody that feels like I can't live with this. That PTSD can be so intense, but stay the course. As you were talking, that was going through my mind. And so, that's just been kind of on the mental health side, my experience in working in this field, is what it's been. And I love that the culture is shifting to be definitely more supportive, to where it doesn't have to be so guarded, and it's encouraged and supported in different ways than it was even 10 years ago. So.
Yeah. And I know what that fear is that you're talking about, having lived it. I remember in that very first, my counselor, my clinician, referred to that very first session as a triage session. And when you triage a major scene with mass casualty scene, you have your red zone, you have your yellow zone, you have your green zone, right? The green is like, okay, we got some very minor injuries. Your yellow is going to be your moderate, or your red's your life critical stuff.
Right.
So when he used that term, I'm like, I can understand that. And as we're laying stuff out, this one's going on the green, that one's definitely red. This one needs some attention, but it's not urgent. It's not life threatening.
Right.
But I remember at the end of that triage session, after laying everything out, and I already knew it, Tammy. I already knew what I was experiencing, and I knew I was hurting, I was broke, and I needed help. Like I was drowning in my own head. And at the end of it, and I was so afraid of it, he said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And maybe if you're listening to this and you're struggling with some trauma, you're struggling with these stresses because of it, maybe you need to hear this, that there was good news and bad news in this moment. And he goes, which one do you want first? I said, give me the bad news first. I'd rather end on the good stuff. He goes, okay, bad news first. You have PTSD. And I was like, okay, I figured. I was afraid you were going to say that. What's the good news? He goes, you have PTSD.
Right.
And I'm sure my face shifted into a question mark. Like, what do you mean by that? He goes, we know what it is.
Right.
We can put in the work. Like, we know that we can build a path forward, and there's hope. Little Star Wars throwback to one of the original three of A New Hope. I love that you said that, as far as that there's hope for everybody. I am a firm believer, and I say this to people all the time, whether they're in handcuffs in the back seat or they're in front of me crying, they just got busted, whatever it is, nobody is trash. Nobody is worth throwing away. I don't care how far down a rabbit hole you think you are or how low in the pit you are. There is hope for every single person. And if it's addiction or if it's substance abuse, whatever it is, there's always hope. You know this about me. I fully support people getting help, whether it's from the addiction side or the treatment side. There is hope.
Right.
There's hope for every one of us.
And I think this ties back to what you were talking about, how we get so used to looking for the problem and the negative and identifying that sometimes we are unable to see that in people when they're at their worst. And I think in your field, you're definitely meeting people when they're at their worst. I, saw that a lot, especially working at Hope in the Valley when they came in and they were intoxicated or high. Like, we're seeing them at their very worst. And if that's all you see and that's where the story ends, then it's really hard to be effective at your job. But we have a responsibility to see past that and let them lean into what we see in them when they don't see it in themselves. It's so interesting to watch someone come into treatment and they're at their very lowest point, but we actually get to see that transformation back to them finding themselves and finding that hope again, because they find their identity and they remember who they are and they remember what they're about. But sometimes they don't have that ability to see it. And if we can't provide that for them temporarily, then where else are they going to go? And so we do have a responsibility to remind them, this isn't who you are. It might be where you're at and it might be consequences you're dealing with, but who you are is resilient and capable, and you can get through this, but it's going to be hard. That's the tough part.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm thinking about a guy that has given us permission to talk about his story. I remember the day that I met him, and because of my job in the position that I'm in, I had to arrest him. But he had come to the Valley wildly intoxicated, and I was able to bring him back and release him there. But I told him right up front, I fully support where you came to. Now, almost, hurting yourself and others on the way here and the driving part, that's why we have to go through this. But make no mistake, you came to the right place. And I endorse the reason why you came. You're here for the right reason, and you need to be here. And as soon as I could, I brought him right back. As I was bringing him back, I kept telling him repeatedly, and I would have him repeat it back to me. And I would tell him, I said, you have value, you have worth, and you have a future. Yeah. Say it back. I have value. What were the other two? Worth and a future. Tell it to me back. So, and then we got inside, and he was brought in, and he goes, "What are the three things again?" I said, "Value," and he goes, "Worth, and a future." I'm like, yeah, man. And he's remembered that, and I'm thankful to have met him and seen him numerous times since, and watched his progress, watched the treatment. And as you were speaking just now, I'm also reminded that when these people are at their lowest point, we're not designed, I think, as people to go through life as an island. We need each other.
Right. We do.
We need, there are times in all of our lives where we need help.
Yeah.
And we're not equipped for the help to help ourselves.
Right.
We need somebody to grab us by the hand and walk through this season with us. And I'm thankful that we get to, talk about that here in this venue, but actually live that out.
Right. I'm curious, because you're in a helping profession. You're helping people. I'm going to take another little sidebar here, but I will say one thing I feel like we get wrong with trauma-informed approaches to treatment is sometimes we miss the importance of structure, framework, consequences, and accountability. All of those things can be in place with compassion and curiosity and understanding, but sometimes we swing the pendulum pretty far towards compassion. This is where law enforcement is still so absolutely necessary, because they give us that framework, that structure, that accountability, and consequences that motivate people to change.
Yeah.
And yet, when we do it with a trauma-informed approach, we're still meeting those people with the compassion. Like, you were still enforcing the consequences.
Yep.
You still had to give him the ticket. He had to operate in that framework, which is wonderful. But then you said, but I'm also going to bring in this other piece. And that's like the perfect balance of that. But the question I want to ask you now is, where and how are you helping new officers that are coming into the field to understand that balance of, yes, we have to enforce the rules. We have to, issue citations. There has to be consequences and accountability. But how do you do that in a trauma-informed way? How are you training new officers to do exactly what you did?
We've heard this term of leading by example a lot. And I think that the problem with that phrase is that you can lead by the wrong example too. But making the conscious choice to lead by the right example and being out there with your teams to do it, the resources that these young cadets are getting in the academy today are far better in this avenue, in this topic. They're far better than what I received when I came out. Everybody starts this job. I would say 99% of the people go into this profession because of their level of compassion and care for their fellow man. I can't say 100%. I can't.
Right.
But that we all started off with the perspective that this is for people. It's not against people. It's for them. It's for that protection of life. It is for that protection of property, for the inherent inalienable rights that we all have in this country, of which I'm thankful for. But just because we started off with that perspective doesn't mean that perspective can change. As you're talking about all these different things that we kind of do in our profession, you were saying something a minute ago that just brought the speech by Paul Harvey, recorded years ago, about the police officer. And little known fact about Paul Harvey, this is for those of you guys that don't know, radio host from decades ago, has written many books, but he has this one radio bit that he did on the police officer. His dad was a cop. And he goes in to define what, it goes back to your question earlier. What does a day look like for you at work? I don't know. I have no idea what tomorrow is going to be.
Right.
But on any given day, yeah, we can be the enforcer of a law. But we also might have to be the investigator of a scene. We also might be a social worker where we're holding someone's child and having to bring in DHS. We might be the person with the coroner delivering the worst news to a family that they just lost a family member. We find ourselves in so many of these different venues and so many different hats. So we're not I'm not a clinician. I'm not a behavioral health specialist, but one of the perspectives that I started this job off, and I think when we share our why with our teams, when they know why we do what we do, when they know why they do what they do, on the hard day, they can remember that or be reminded of that, just to keep their perspective. And don't let me get too far off that topic, because I do want to talk about the book coming up. But I remember early on having this perspective, and I've already shared, that my faith is at the foundation of who I am, but it also as at the foundation of my resilience. I had this unique perspective starting off with the job that I get the opportunity to interact with people at their worst, not at their best. And I think about this like Christ. He didn't deal with people on their best day.
Right.
It was their worst day. And I'm not saying that if Jesus was walking with sandals in the dirt today, that he'd have a duty belt on or a badge or a gun. No, he probably wouldn't. However, I get the opportunity to be with the same people that he did in those hard moments. And I remember being asked during the hiring process, what I think the hardest thing's going to be in the job. And this is kind of like one of those questions that are being asked of something you don't even know.
Right.
But
right.
I told my background investigator, I told him, I said, I think it's going to be death notifications. I think that's going to be the hardest thing. And Tammy, that's true. They are the hardest things.
Yeah.
But when he turned the question to, what are you looking forward the most? And I'm like, well, being the first person that gets to take care of them in that moment, and knowing what I'm bringing to the table with my heart, with my compassion for my fellow man, I get to be in that hard moment and be the very first person to care for them through those very first life-changing moments.
Yeah.
So while it's the hardest thing, it's also one of the most beautiful things in its own right.
Right.
I think the more we share from a leadership perspective, as we share these things with this new generation of, it's not just about a citation or a traffic stop or an arrest. These are people. And I remember being green behind the ears and starting off too, and you're nervous about everything or fearful of everything, because you're trained for the worst case scenario.
Right.
Or the worst case scenarios, because we go through so many of them and the training is vast. Once that becomes muscle memory of how to do the job, I think we need to think back to our Lego guy in that 5 to 10 year block. That's where officers make the choice whether they stay to do this and finish off a career in this profession, or if they bow out gracefully and go do something else. That's in that 5 to 10 year Lego man window.
Right.
That's when we make those investments. And I think it's really before the 5-year mark of saying, don't forget to have empathy, to have sympathy. I think about our traffic contacts policy, and I've presented this around the country. And I've used my policy in black and white, black letters, white paper. It tells us exactly what to say on a traffic stop, which is really wild, right? This is going to blow people's minds. This is earth-shattering. It tells us to identify ourselves and our agency. Hi, I'm Sergeant Hazelett with the State Patrol. It tells us to tell them the reason for the contact. You're pulled over because of this. And it tells us to ask for the required documentation of a license, registration, and insurance. After that, I argue that there is more room on the white paper than there is in the black lettering. And I've said this in front of my command staff too. A policy in policing will never tell you to care about people. A policy in policing is not going to say, use sympathy if you've been through something similar. Use empathy if you haven't, and you can feel the weight of what they're going through. Yeah. A policy in policing will not say, be a human being, because inherently we are. But I think when we go back to the very beginning of this conversation, when we get tied up in identity, you know, I've heard officers say, "Who do you think you are? You're talking to a state trooper." Like, whoa,
Yeah.
pump the brakes, trooper man. Who do you think you are talking to a fellow human being like that? I have feelings too.
Yeah.
Or let's turn that around. That's just because they violated a law, whether it's minor or major, doesn't mean that we need to be treating them just because of the choice. That's a human being.
Right.
Now, we have to do a lot of things in our job. We take people's freedom of movement away when we have to arrest them. We take them away from their families from times because we have to book them into jail and hold them accountable to the bad choices. But the last thing that we should ever take from anybody is their dignity. If you take their dignity, you've taken everything. And if you've done that, you should probably find something else to do.
Yeah, I agree. I will just share, it was just over 2 years ago, my son attempted suicide, and I was scared to death. I was trying to get to him, trying to locate him. I was on the phone with 911, trying to keep him on the phone. I met up with him, had a minute with him, got the gun out of his hands. And, you know, then they said, "Hey, a state patrol is going to meet you and escort you guys to the ambulance." As soon as we met up with the state patrolman, I knew him. He had pulled me over at one point, of course, but also he grew up here. He, you know, is a friend of the family, but the calmness and the kindness that he showed stabilized me.
Yeah.
Here I was, like, I was scared to death. I didn't know what all had happened with my son. I knew the gun didn't go off, but I knew he had ingested some things. I was scared to death. I was trying to think. And immediately that officer being there, showing up the way that he did, just helped regulate my nervous system. Later, talking to him, he's like, "Tammy, you were so calm." And a lot of that I attribute to his approach to being there for me and the way he handled it. And, you know, he's all, I just knew we were going to be okay as soon as he was there. And that comes from interactions with him, you know, over a lifetime, but also just, he'd pulled me over before. He was kind, he was respectful. And when he showed up on the scene, I knew we were going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then, after my son's accident, when they got him to the hospital, this is such a weird core memory that I have, but we were there at Kness County Hospital and there was a sheriff deputy there. I think that's who it was. I don't know. Everything is kind of a blur in that moment, but I just remember him grabbing and just giving me a hug and just, because I remember how hard his vest felt against my face. It was like hard, Velcro-y, but it was so comforting. And I don't even remember exactly which one it was in that moment, but I remember what I needed and the stability that provided. And I think sometimes when officers show up in that ability to just stabilize and care and respond, I don't know what either one of those officers had to do to debrief those experiences when they left, because they were so regulated for my sake.
Yeah.
I hope they had the support they needed, because I think those were tough days probably for both of them, because these, you know, they know our family, they know my son, they kind of know what we were going through. But to have them show up that way for me, it was so powerful. And, you know, when you said, like, I want to be the one that can notify a family when they've lost a loved one. It's such a sacred responsibility.
Yeah.
But when you show up the right way, it makes all the difference. And those two officers were key players in like really horrific experiences that I've had in my life, and I'm grateful for them. And I hope that they know how much their caring really did regulate my nervous system in those moments.
Thank you for sharing that. There, from this side of that, and I know the story you're sharing with the trooper as well. We don't get the opportunity to see things through in the follow-up.
Yeah.
The majority of the time. I think that there is a gift in working in the rural area of Colorado, but in a rural area period, as opposed to a metro area. I spent most of my career working up the I-25 corridor from Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, Denver, Um, and there, like when somebody is killed on the road, it's like a boulder being dropped into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make a
Right.
ripple effect, but it's gonna go away really quick.
Yeah.
My very first day down here in the valley, and I started off my career in the rural area. I get to finish my career in the rural area, which is also a gift. But my very first day down here, I'll just say 4 years ago, had an event that happened in the afternoon of my very first shift in the valley that for me was normal on a Tuesday before lunch, and we'll probably do it again after lunch, was a rollover crash with a triple ejection. 2 people died. And for me, that was a normal day in the Front Range. We would sometimes cover multiple fatals in a day. But down here, that kind of crash doesn't happen very often. And, I had that, I kind of, I'm not superstitious kind of guy. I'm a little stitious. I felt like I brought it with me, right? I felt like I brought the Front Range with me on that day. But I remember the scene, very well. I remember the case very well. But what stands out in my memory is the next day. The next day, we hadn't even purchased our home here yet. I was staying at the hotel across the street from the patrol office, and I went to Campus Cafe, one of our local favorites here. If you haven't tried the cinnamon roll, go for it. But I remember going in for breakfast the next morning, and this gal walked up to me, and she thanked me for what I do. And then she said, "Were you on the crash yesterday?" Now, that's a question that no officer is going to get in the Front Range. Which one are you talking about?
Right.
I didn't have to ask any qualifying or clarifying questions to know which crash she was talking about. And I told her I was. And she connected one of the people that had died to a member of her family, and again thanked me for the work that we do. And it was on that very second day I realized that same boulder that in the Front Range, of course it's going to affect their families, but you never feel it in a large society like that. Take that same size boulder, it's like dropping it in a puddle in the valley. When something happens to your family, Tammy, my family feels it.
Yeah.
When something happens to somebody else's family, we all feel it in a smaller community. And that's a gift. We get to show up and be there for each other. We're not robots. Like we hurt, we cry, we give hugs with a vest on. My daughter, well, both of them and my wife will like lean their head differently, all varying heights and sizes. They'll lean their head differently so I don't poke their face with my badge or my radio. And I've made the joke ever since I started. If I'm getting a hug, is I know that you're hugging me back. I just can't feel it.
Right.
But every officer I think that the public sees, there is a public perception of different occupations. We have a certain perspective of what we think people are in this profession, but at the end of the day, we are husbands, we are wives, we are fathers, we are mothers, we're friends, we're sons, we're daughters. All those things that I defined of who I am, but we've chosen, this is a voluntary force. It's not like it was when I was in the military. I signed a contract for a number of years. They owned me. In law enforcement, and maybe this is an interesting perspective to share with people, is a voluntary force. Every officer that shows up at work that day, they're not under a contract. They've not promised a certain number of years. They're voluntarily showing up into our communities every day because they choose to, because they want to protect what's most important. You can replace cars all day long. You can't replace people.
Yeah. 100%. And I love that you really highlighted the role that officers can play on those really difficult times, whether it's a boulder in an ocean or a boulder in a puddle. Either way, for the person experiencing, it's always a puddle.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that role is so crucial. But I've thought a lot about what was it like? What were they processing, seeing my suffering, seeing my fear, being there as we're watching our son get flown out, knowing that we
Yep.
probably weren't going to bring him home. They were experiencing that on a human level, like you talked about
Yep.
as well. And yet, they're trained. But at a certain point, like you said, it bottlenecks up, and then you find yourself saying, what is wrong with me? And I've wondered, like, how I hope they've got the help and the care that they need, because I was one call on one day. And if
Yep.
this is what they're doing all day, every day, what about the human side of them? And are they getting the care that they need? Yeah.
I'm so thankful for your returned care back to them. I wish more people shared that as well. But you're probably spot on. Those things do affect us. You know, we talked about that, the misnomer of the work-life balance. I'm going to leave that at work.
Right.
Nope. That's coming home. There are things that can't pierce the bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
There are things that you can't see that go right through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine. So I'm curious, what have you found helps you with the self-care and being able to like stay in this field when these things come up? What have been some of the things and some of the probably like professional, more clinical things, but also just personal? How do you take care of yourself and keep your own self regulated and okay when you're trying to show up in a certain way for everybody else in the world?
First and foremost, like we've talked about, that foundation is my faith, and knowing that I'm never alone in that, and that I'm given a strength that is not mine to do the things that I normally couldn't do. Secondarily, I am genuinely thankful for my wife. I can tell her anything. She's genuinely my best friend, and I can tell her how it affected me. She knows that there's things that stick with me because she knows what I went through. I think being open about what you've experienced with somebody that genuinely cares about you in your life, whether it's your best friend, whether it's your wife or your husband, I think it's important, or your counselor, to communicate, to talk, and be open. Keep the lid off the bottle, because it's going to get shaken up and there's going to be pressure in there. If the lid's on it, the pressure is going to build. If you keep the lid off, you can get shaken and then you're not going to blow up. So
I love that analogy.
That open lid is open communication. That probably has kept me most grounded throughout my career.
There's something secure about that. I also appreciate what you said about being able to just like talk to someone about it. There's something about having your pain witnessed that makes it real, and you don't question your own sanity when there's somebody else to kind of validate. Like you went through some stuff. And so, I appreciate you pointing that out as well. And the analogy of the bottle, just keep the lid off. You're going to get shaken and it's going to get fizzy, but the pressure won't build. That's such a good analogy.
Yeah.
Do you have any ridiculous self-care habits that would surprise people?
I love to cook.
Oh, really?
Cooking is therapeutic for me. Even before the girls were born, Amy and I would make an evening out of that. We would enjoyed like just taking our time. You know, there's 30-minute recipes here and there on a weekday or work night or whatever it is, but I really like to take my time making a meal for my family. I don't know, it's therapeutic. Yeah.
One of the most therapeutic things I do in a day, this is so silly, but like our mailbox is maybe, I don't know, I would say like 50, 60 feet from our house, but just walking to the mailbox and back, when things get short, I don't know why that does that. It's just a weird little thing, but it's just
something simple.
Little things that we can do. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I have completely enjoyed this conversation. My goodness, the depth of it is just kind of blowing my mind, and I'm trying to process as we're talking. What would be one of the most important things that you would want them to really know and understand from the message that you've shared today?
never miss the opportunity for a meaningful moment with somebody.
Mm.
What might just be something normal for you, and it might have been normal for that trooper with you, just to show up the way that he did.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know the impact and the meaning that the person receiving that is going to have. When we first moved down here, there was this young gal that was working at a gas station here in Alamosa, and I'd seen her a few times, and I went in this one particular day, and she just didn't have the same bright smile. I could tell she was carrying some weight, and I asked her a question that we often ask each other in passing as a greeting. You know, I used the same words of, "Hey, how are you?" to slow that down and mean it. And I said, "Hey, how are you?" And she knew I meant the question, and I was prepared to listen. And I was at work, dressed in my uniform, and she opened up. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I am fighting for custody of my kids. I'm going through this court process." And she just started just laying it out there. And actually at the very beginning, she said, "I'm hanging on." And I asked, "What are you hanging on to?" And that's when she opened up. And then I gave her a piece of advice. I said something to her, and I didn't remember what I said at all.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see her again I saw her maybe once or twice in a short amount of time in the weeks after that. But then there was this big break in time until I saw her again. And when I did, it was like a year or two later. I ran into her and I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, what you said to me that day changed my life." And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, "It was about your toothpaste theory." And my toothpaste theory was super simple. Like, the contents of who you are doesn't come out until you apply pressure to it. And I was like, "Oh, I've said that to several people before." But that moment of taking just a few seconds to mean what you say, for her, it was everything. And her whole world turned around after that. And I'd love to bring her into this space, this podcast space, and share the whole story, because there's so many fun details along the way that made it so meaningful back for me, because I didn't realize I meant what I said, and I cared in that moment. I really did. But did I think twice about it the next day? I didn't. She did for the year or the two after, and made choices that she wouldn't have made otherwise. And I'm so thankful that we have that opportunity with each other. So make those little moments meaningful. I heard an old long in the tooth cop early in my career. I was eating with this old sergeant at a restaurant, and somebody came up and thanked us for what we do. And without skipping a beat, he didn't say "You're welcome." He said, "You're worth it."
Oh,
and ever since then, I don't say "You're welcome." I learned something from that man that day. And over all these years, when people come up to me and say, "Hey, thanks for what you do," that's been my response ever since, because that's why I do what I do. It's because of you. It's because of your family, and you're worth it.
I love that. My goodness. Yeah. That hit me in the feels when you said that. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's a perfect landing spot for our conversation. Yeah. And probably the biggest takeaway is I hope that everybody that's listening knows that they're worth it. They're worth the effort that we're making all the time. And hopefully we can recognize it in ourselves and recognize it in others, and show up authentically for each other.
Agreed.
I'm curious if you have any projects, anything going on, anything you're aware of in the community that you would like to share or plug or let our listeners know about.
Oh, sure. I just finished writing a book called The Gift of Perspective. We've talked about perspective quite a bit. We've talked about gifts quite a bit. The reason why we stay in conversations with each other, and we've had this conversation between you and I and our listeners today, is because we care. We take these opportunities to share gifts of perspective and look at things a little bit differently. I finished writing this book recently. I'm not yet to publishing just yet, so I don't know where it's going to be published at. But here in the near future, I'm looking forward to publishing The Gift of Perspective. It's sharing my life story. It's through the lens and perspective of a career police officer and military veteran, because as we know, with the stories that have been shared today, it changes the way you look at things.
It does. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to share with your listeners just some of my perspective, and it's been a joy today, Tammy.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as soon as we find out where that's published, we'll be sure and share it with all of our listeners and get the word out there. I can't wait to read
Great.
it. That's exciting. So
Thank you.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Thank you so much. This was such a good conversation, and I appreciate all the depth and understanding and perspective that you've given me today. So I'm sure our listeners will glean just as much from it as I have. So thank you.
You're worth it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with me on the For Peyton podcast. My hope is that this conversation gave you something to think about, something to carry with you, or maybe a reminder that you're not alone. If you'd like to go deeper, you'll find companion episodes and related digital downloads for each topic at valentinecounseling.org. This will help you continue reflecting, learning, and applying what resonates. Until next time, for Pete's sake, take care of yourself and each other. This is For Peyton.